Hello, everyone. Welcome to Collective Conversations, a storytelling blog and digital archive that uplifts the voices of Chicago community-centered organizations, grassroots leaders, and local change makers. We are here today with Raeghn Draper. Raeghn is the co-founder and executive director of the CHAAD Project, a painter, and the co-author of Chicago's progressive voter guide, Girl, I Guess. With over 12 years of experience in restaurants as a dishwasher, cook, server, host, and bartender, they have a working class experience that they weave throughout their work. Raeghn is passionate about advocating for hospitality workers and challenging toxic structures in the industry. Their inspiration comes from diverse perspectives and utilizes the world around them. Welcome, Raeghn.
Thanks for having me. I'm very
Yeah.
happy to be here.
Oh, thank you for being here. I first want to start off with just learning a little bit more about you. So can you share a little bit about how you came to your work as a community organizer, and then like also what came first? Was it being a painter? Was it being an artist? Or was it the organizing? Or did they all kind of always coexist?
Mm, I think I would like to imagine that they all kind of coexist, and there were little threads or little clues of their existence before they actually manifested themselves. But I think I came to my organizing work the same as my artistry through necessity. I started working at a young age because I had to pay bills. I probably started working at like 9, 10 years old as like a babysitter, but my first job was 15, where I like received my first paycheck and I always had to work. Um, and my early working experiences were all in restaurant spaces. And in there, I experienced a lot of abuses, but also just bullying and toxic work environments, things that at a young age I thought, okay, this is just normal. This is part of the work. I think, especially in restaurant spaces, there is a culture of like suck it up and tough it out and develop a thick skin. So I did try my best to do that, but I was always kind of opinionated and loudmouthed. And yeah, I always had something to say or something to complain about. And I'm also the oldest of 10. So I'm really used to, yeah, a lot. I grew up with, there were 8 of us in the house. So I grew up with 7 of them. And so taking care, looking out for, and caring for other people was just that's all I've ever known. So I think that definitely bled into my work within the community. I think working in restaurants, I developed what people would call like a family, people I cared about, people that I thought were my ride or die or still are. And I think through that care and through developing relationships with people, it's like, oh, I want to advocate for them. And so I began practicing that within restaurant spaces, and that bled out into community organizing or activism is what people will call it. When I was getting my bachelor's, my teachers would often recommend um, internships or fellowships that were had some kind of organizing or nonprofit philanthropy background, because I think they saw that I had a bleeding heart. um, and I love a soapbox. So,
Oh my goodness, I love that. And just the way that you tie that back to the origins of your family story and how that all kind of evolved into your work family is really, really beautiful. And you're not originally from Chicago, right?
no, I was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Mhm.
We moved around a lot though as a kid. So while I was born in Milwaukee and did spend some years there as a child, I've also lived in Arizona. I've lived in parts of Minnesota, and I've lived in other parts of Wisconsin, both rural, urban, and suburban places. So I came to Chicago in 2015 for a job. I think for what a lot of people come to the city for, just pursue a dream, to get a higher paying job. I came here because I wanted to be a pastry chef. And yeah, I got hired right after my like pastry programming. I got hired at a popular restaurant in the Gold Coast, and yeah, slowly worked. I mean, kitchens really, I think, expedited my understanding that restaurants were not wholesome places. I've worked back of house, and I've also worked front of house positions. And some of the worst positions I held were in kitchen spaces. Extremely toxic and extremely male dominated. And it can be very frightening and even dangerous to be the only woman in a male space. So those early experiences within restaurants, I think, fed a lot of what fueled my organizing later on. But yeah, Chicago is my home. This is the longest I've lived in any single city, any single place. I've been here for over 10 years now. I love it. I have family here. I love the labor and organizing history here. I love how Chicago loves Chicago, and I love how Chicago won't let anybody talk bad about Chicago. It's giving family, you know. I can talk about my cousin, but you can't talk about my cousin.
Mhm.
And so I guess it's my vibe. I like it. I'll ride or die for my family.
Oh, I am resonating so much with what you said because I'm also not from here and I moved here in 2017, so not far from when you did. And
Mm.
that ride for Chicago is so real. And I feel like now, almost 10 years in, I'm starting to adopt it. I'm like, oh yeah, nah, 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 nah. When my family is like, did you see on the news? I'm like, I saw it. Everything's fine. We don't need to talk about it.
Yeah. You live here? Do you know what it's like? Then be
Like,
quiet.
we're good. Everything's fine. You started to, develop this calling to organize within hospitality, but what was the thing that finally got you to create this formal structure of the CHAAD project? What were the beginnings of that?
Yeah, the like all things, it was kind of a survival necessity kind of thing. CHAAD was founded in 2020. I was working at a popular rooftop restaurant as a server downtown, and the pandemic hit, and we were all not laid off immediately. We're in this weird limbo state where we're not working, but we're not fired. Um, this job was great for many of us because it provided a lot of benefits. We got health insurance, we got 401k. These are things that don't normally exist with inside restaurant spaces. The pay was really good, and then suddenly that was all gone. We had no health insurance in the middle of a pandemic. And oh, so our restaurant was asking us, this is probably about like April, May. So still in the thick of it. Still the city is like semi shut down, trying to figure out what it's doing. Our restaurant asks us to come back to work, or asks some of us to volunteer to come back to work. Um, and if you remember anything about COVID, everyone was like, we don't know anything. Why? We don't know anything. That's why we're in our houses. We don't know what's going on. We just know people are dying, and you're asking me to come and serve people. So a coworker and I started talking. Leah Ball is her name, and we decided we wanted to draft a letter to our management with demands that we would come back to work, but we need these things. We need a PPE, protective equipment. We want a higher base pay to compensate for working in a pandemic. This is also during the time where lots of Black Lives Matter protests were happening. We had the George Floyd uprising. Lots of restaurants and businesses across the US were signaling support for Black Lives Matter, whether that was just, a black square, or a lot of places backing it up with money, backing it up with donations. Our establishment hadn't done any of that. So we also had demands around Black Lives Matter and around putting, this is a place that was really popular, had a lot of money, putting money towards these issues. So in the drafting of this letter, her and I began talking to our coworkers. We began organizing. We wrote a list of everyone we worked with, and we're like, okay, you're going to talk to these people, you're going to talk to these people, and we're going to get folks to agree to sign on to this letter. And as we were doing that, lots of other restaurants in Chicago were doing the same thing. Lots of other workers were trying to organize their workplaces for many different reasons. Some of them similar to us, other ones, they had lost their health insurance. Their boss set up a fundraiser for them on GoFundMe, and they never saw any of the money. Lots of stuff was happening. They were being told if they don't come back to work, they're going to be fired, things like that. So we started gathering what people were telling us around the city, in the hopes that it would bolster our own letter. We were mostly looking out for if other restaurants were making statements of Black Lives Matter or putting money forward, what could we demand of our restaurant? So we started gathering this list. We also started gathering like COVID-19 violations from restaurants and any whispers of labor abuses. And it was just a Google spreadsheet. And then friends got wind that we were gathering this information and they wanted to see it. So we just made the Google spreadsheet live and it blew up. Um, Hundreds of people were viewing it over the course of a couple of days. We were receiving dozens of emails, people asking, "What is this? How do I get involved? I want more of this. Can I help?" Yeah, and we were just two girls with a Google spreadsheet. Um, yeah, that's really how it got started. What it signaled to us was that restaurant workers, because that's whose stories we were collecting. We were collecting the stories of the restaurant workers, did not and still really do not have a platform where their experiences and their voices are believed, are championed, and are the forefront of the narrative that we tell about restaurant spaces and about hospitality. So this was our stories, our little secrets about abuse and bullying and other treatment within restaurants was being taken seriously and being tracked. So that's how CHAAD came about. I think for me, I had dipped my toe in a lot of different organizing spaces. I've done defund CPD. I organized with, LGBTQ trans folks. I've done mental health awareness. I've done like youth programming. When we started CHAAD, I felt like it was the first time that my lived experience really, really aligned with what I was advocating for and organizing around. Like I could speak, um, not only speak to my own experience, but speak in a way that then the audience that we were trying to reach understood because I'd spent at that point like over 10 years working in restaurants. And I think that's what also separates us from like traditional charity models or philanthropy models is when CHAAD was founded, but still to this day, it is restaurant workers who are organizing within CHAAD.
Mhm.
And I think that's what makes our work really effective. And that's what makes our community really receptive to our work because they can hear it within anything we put out, within the program we make, within the stories that we share, that we are restaurant workers trying to advocate for other restaurant workers.
Power to you for that. And I want to just lift up what you kind of outlined for us. I know like people hear the phrase like community organizing and it's like really intimidating. They're like, oh my God, I could never. But the way
Mm-hmm.
you just kind of broke that down, you're like, yeah, we wrote down everybody we wanted to talk to, we split them up, we did that. And then we created a spreadsheet, and then all of a sudden we had organized this thing. Like I know it interstitially there's a lot of complicated things, like even having those conversations is complicated. But to put it that way, I think is really helpful for folks who are like, how do I start? Talk to people.
Absolutely. I think there's just a lot of mystery and around organizing and there's a lot of jargon around it and there's a lot of you need experience around it, but really it's just talking to the people closest to you. Those can be your classmates, those can be your coworkers, those can be your neighbors. They are often those people. And yes, it does take some skill and tact. Like you get better at it the more you do it, but really it just comes down to you being open to listen to people and actually hear them as another person and listen out for, okay, what do they care about? What are their issues in their in life? How can I relate to them? On a really just like human basic level. It's not really that complicated. It's a lot of listening and care. Even when we split up the list, there were people I didn't really like, as you don't like all your coworkers, and there were people she didn't like. And we split those people up. She took the folks
Mm.
that I didn't like. I took the folks that she didn't like, just so that we knew when we were going into these conversations with our coworkers that we could have like the best mindset. And that was also really beautiful to be able to be honest with someone about the best way to go about this instead of just being like, we got to talk to all these people, we got to hit these numbers. We were having like really slow conversations with people.
Appreciate that. If I could just extract this piece, it feels like a good, like, here's how you start. Even you saying, like, it was slow. I mean, there is rapid response. We know that that is a thing. But even rapid response is built off of a slow build of creating the structure to do the rapid response.
Yeah.
So I thank you for breaking that down for all of us. I do want to, talk just a tad bit about Girl, I Guess.
Mm,
How did you become involved with that project?
Stephanie Scora is one of the original co-authors of Girl, I Guess. Her and I became friends. I want to say 2016 is when I met Stephanie at a protest. Um, when we still did that. No, Stephanie jokes that she's a grandma now, and she's like, I'll leave that to young people. Um, yeah, I met her at a protest and we were friends. So she started the guide, and then her co-author decided to stop because the guide's a lot of work. She did it solo for a while, and she knew that I was a writer. She knew I was an organizer, and I try to be as on the ground and caught up with all the tea of my local community. Um, and this was probably 3 years ago now. She asked if I had any interest in helping write the guide. Um, and I told her I do not care about electoral politics. And she said, that's fantastic. You'll be great at
Like, you won't have any bias at all.
it. I told her I hate politicians, and she's like, great, perfect. Hired.
Oh my God, that's perfect. I'm definitely an avid user of that guide. And the voice in which it is written is clearly like uh skeptical. Which I appreciate because I'm like, okay, cool. So whatever whoever they're recommending from a place of truth and research, and even the recommendations are with healthy skepticism. So
Yeah.
I appreciate you naming that, like, listen, I write it, but I don't believe in the system in which it's functioning.
Yeah.
For you, what's the relationship between, or is there a relationship for you between that work and your work with the Chat Project?
hmm and my caveat to what I just said, I do care about local elections. I think there's a lot of power. That there's a lot of power in local elections. I
Mhm.
think I have a lot of reserve for federal politics, for
Mhm.
presidential elections. But I do think where we can have the most impact, where we do have the most influence, is in our local community. So that's, Chicago, and then even tighter, our wards. And it's really the same with worker organizing or labor organizing. You have the most power in hyper localized ecosystems or community settings. You might not be able to change the entire industry. We can try. There's a couple things we could try, but where you have the greatest power and influence is just within your restaurant of 20 people, 100 people, whatever it is. And it's the same with local elections. I think since writing the guide too, I've gotten more familiar with like who are the people running for office, who are the characters that continue to show up, who are the bullies within the political scene. And it has been exciting to see like quote unquote more everyday working class people go after elected seats. It's been exciting to see people that I've organized with on some capacity to move that way. Not the way I'm gonna go, but all the power to those of you who want to.
Mhm.
And I think it's another area for I think the biggest tool for getting people to organize, for getting people to realize that they're powerful and that they can do more and more and more, encouraging and mentoring them through ways to exercise their power. And local elections especially are a great way to exercise your power, because you can push out a candidate, an elected official that's been there for 30 years with like 5 votes, with 10 votes, 10 people. You talk to your neighbors and suddenly you flipped a seat. Um, and that actually has a great impact in your neighborhood and in, the surrounding blocks. Like you will see a change, whereas it's a little bit different with like seats in Congress and whatnot. So I think it's another area for everyday people to flex their power, and I'm really excited about folks taking advantage of that. I also believe in tools that are approachable and not pretentious. I think politics is a place where people like to pretend they're really important because I don't know why. And that's another thing the guide has taught me. These people, some of these people are just not very smart. They're not, they're not. Who are you? Where did you come from? And just because you built a website about your candidacy, I don't know, you now think that you can speak from a place of expertise and experience. It's just, and it's not that people can't. I think it's another area where kind of professionalism comes into play, and some people can fulfill the role and other people can't. And I love tools and movements that kind of dismantle that, break down the jargon, and make it approachable for everyone to participate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Shout out to that because that's exactly what that guy does. Is like, as someone who is certainly, I mean, I have knowledge of politics, but on the local level, it becomes intimidating because there is so much to vote for. There are
Yeah,
so many things.
there's so many positions that you didn't even know existed.
Right, right.
What
You're like, wait,
happening?
what and where? But also important, and what that guide really does do is it speaks to you like a human. It doesn't, like you said, there's no pretentiousness about it. It's just like, yo, this person totally did this thing.
Hmm.
Do what you want, but we're just letting you know. It's very easy to read in that way. And also, I would go back to what you said, like, who are all these characters that keep showing up? As a theater person, I really appreciate that because it does read like that sometimes. It's like,
It does. And then you
sorry,
learn about the drama, the tea, and it's just like, oh my God, is this a soap opera?
it's hilarious to watch. Just to think of the narrative of Girl, I guess I'm like, ooh, what book are they putting out today? Because this is gorgeous. So thank you for your work on that. And I'm sure lots of people are very, very grateful for that resource. Moving us forward a little bit, you've talked a lot about community and your different pockets of community, but can we talk just what is that word? We throw that word a lot around, and I know it has meaning to certain people, but some people are just using it as a catch-all for a lot of things.
Hmm.
What does it mean to you, and how do you and by association the CHAAD project approach building community?
Hmm. Yeah, I think um there's a lot of ways you can interpret that, and I think um it depends on what scale also community can shift. So community can also be within identity. I would say as a queer Black woman, like those are community spaces that I feel called to name. But for me, community, just to the rawest sense, is a group of people or a collective that looking out for each other's interest and honestly just survival, and it's willing to be um is willing to be uncomfortable in order to support one another. I think that's something that's been coming up a lot with community lately is, oh, I have to show up for folks. I actually have to do work. It's like, yeah, if you want real community, I think the way that it's actually supposed to be implemented, it takes work, it takes being inconvenienced, and it takes being uncomfortable. So I would say to me, it's like truest sense is a group of people who are supporting one another, interested in each other's survival. Not even interested, I think it's symbiotic.
Mm.
We need each other to survive in order for the individual to also survive. And we are willing to be inconvenienced in order to make that happen. Um, how does CHAAD approach building community? Well, we definitely center the voices of the people that we're trying to reach and talk to and influence. So we are worker led. The programming, the education, the stories that we tell all are informed by what our base is. And we are very firm that our base is hourly workers in Chicago. We do produce things for or work with managers and owners at times, but we're not really interested in speaking to them or hearing from them that often. If you're a manager and you have an issue, definitely reach out. We'll help you. We'll do what we can to help you, but we are really interested in working with workers and championing workers and supporting workers, hourly workers. So yeah, we take their lead in what they want to see from the CHAAD project. I think we really view the CHAAD project, while there are those of us that are internally, like we're employed by CHAAD and we're doing the work of CHAAD, I think we all view this as a community project. So if it needs to evolve, if it needs to shift, in order to adjust to what the community needs are, it's going to do that. An example of that is almost since its founding, we've produced Know Your Rights workshops for workers. What are the basic labor laws within Chicago, Illinois, and even federally that you can use to protect yourself and to enforce your rights within the workplace? In 2025, we shifted that programming to include immigration rights because we saw with the increase of ICE activity in the city, and we heard from our community, like this is directly impacting hourly restaurant workers, specifically those who are undocumented or migrant workers. And so then we shifted our programming to then include immigration material, as well as some like rapid response and mutual aid around immigration issues, because that was our community's need, and it is still part of our programming to this day. I don't think it's something that we're going to take away, but that's an example of how, community to us means that, specifically with the CHAAD project, that it will shift based off of what needs are coming up.
That makes so much sense. And even going back to your definition of community, that piece that you mentioned about being uncomfortable,
Mm-hmm.
inconvenienced, I think is so important, because I do think there's oh, and they're here for me and it's fun and we're just like, we go out together and it's great. Like, but no, like there is actual work when you actually boil down what community actually is.
Yeah.
You're not just friends. Like I think
We can be friends and we can party, but
absolutely, absolutely.
that's not all of it.
Right. We do have to cross over from friendship to building community, and that's where the discomfort in the work comes in. So I love you mentioning that, and then also talking about the evolution of CHAAD and how and just how responsive you all are is really great to see. As you've been on this journey with all of your organizing, with creating this organization, of course, we're going to continue to celebrate all the success. That's great. Yay for that. But I think it's also important to talk about like where things went a little left.
Mm-hmm.
So as you reflect on your career of organizing, what's like a mistake or a misstep that you've learned from, something that you look back now as a lesson, or even something that you look back on now and go like, oh my God, I can't believe I thought that was the way to go.
Mm-hmm.
Anything like that.
I think there's a few things. I've definitely had to learn to unpack urgency. I think especially coming out of the restaurant industry, it's all about how fast you move and everything is urgent when it comes to food and drink. Um, and even within like the nonprofit world, things are really urgent. There's always a crisis. And yes, sometimes you do need to move with haste, but it cannot be a sustained part of your work culture. And I think with CHAAD, we get a lot of very sensitive material from workers about what they're experiencing. And I think when we first started CHAAD, well, there was a lot of anger, not only from those of us who were founding CHAAD, but also from restaurant workers. We felt abandoned by our industry. And so there was a real push to like, let's cancel everybody. Let's just off all these people right now. We're done. Me too. I was there. And I think that still shows up when we get these stories from people. It's like, oh my God, you are experiencing something really awful. Let's be loud. Let's be aggressive. Let's like blast this story out and get this person canceled. And you can totally do that if that's what, the person who has the story, the experience, the survivor wants to do, but that's not very good organizing.
Mm.
Not only for the people whose experience it is, but also for the perpetrators. Um, so I think we've had to learn to take a step back, to slow down, again, to be good at listening and really curious about what does the person telling us, what does the worker need? What do they actually need? We don't always have to, light the torches and go and try to burn all the shit down. Oftentimes people just need to be insulated. They need to be heard. They need a safe space. And that requires us to slow down. And it requires us to be really regulated. I think I've had to learn to let go of some of my own anger and resentment from things I've experienced in the industry. It definitely comes back up at times. But yeah, I think that's what, like going back to when we talked about earlier, anybody can organize, anyone can talk to their community. That is true. I would say one of the best skills you can learn to develop as an organizer is regulate yourself, work on your own healing, because you're gonna have to show up as like a whole person and potentially hear some really horrible things from folks, depending on the community you're trying to work with. So yeah, slowing down definitely. I'm also a very trusting person, and I want everybody to be involved with the group project. And I've learned, I think it's bigger than any person. I think we're socialized as a society to take direction from authority figures. And at least in this work, wanting as many people as possible to be involved, it's like, oh, you have an interest in this work? Okay, here's your piece, run with it. But I've learned that people actually need a lot of direction and guidance, and it takes time to get them to a place where they can do things on their own without being told or guided. And instead of I've given people pieces before and been like, okay, run with it, and they don't run with it. And I'm like, why the fuck did you do the thing you said you were interested? Why didn't you do it?
Mhm.
Oh, tell me what to do. You didn't tell me how to do it. I thought you were an adult, you're a real person. And I don't, those have been moments of tension and like resentment building up. And I've had to learn that sometimes people need to be shown not only how to do things, but even how to think and operate outside of a system that's constantly telling them what to do and how to do it. I think that's another level of the layers of organizing that. Okay, okay, you don't need an authority figure always. Let's talk about accountability and like how to show up within community. But yeah, I would say those are some of the lessons I've learned along the way.
Another gem, another gem. Like that like slowing down and regulating, I think is such an important thing for all of us. I was just producing a series last month, and we talked about this very thing about how we're so, especially right now, we're so dysregulated.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that usually causes us to respond in ways that we may not respond otherwise. So I so support that regulation and how that influences the strategy, and how you were talking about like you could just cancel them, like that is one way, but that's not necessarily good organizing. So I think that distinction is really important. Like that is one way to go.
Mm-hmm.
We're talking about organizing, building the movement, building this infrastructure, that may not always be the right way to move. So again, that is a really great distinction to lift up. So you are also a creative. You're a painter, artist.
Mm-hmm.
How does that, or again, does it have any influence over your community organizing work? Like how does creativity come into play?
Yeah, it definitely does. So yeah, I'm a painter. I'm also a writer. But my writing, I used to write a lot more creatively, and I don't as much now, just because so many of my jobs require writing. So I don't want to do it for fun as much anymore, which is sad. So I've shifted to painting. I found painting also in 2020. Such a year for me. I think I was in my Saturn return. So, um, I found painting in 2020 with the death of my brother Aziz. Um, I, yeah, TMI, I'm gonna tell it. I wanted to paint before he died. I was like curious about painting. So he died in March. That Christmas, that December before he died, a bunch of my friends gifted me paint supplies because I had been saying I wanted to paint. And I got all the supplies. I started trying to paint, but I didn't like it. I would, paint like a bowl of fruit or a window, a tree. And I was just like, this is all, I hate this. I don't like any of this. This isn't fun. So I stopped. And then my brother died. And then I was home alone and I was called to paint. I wanted to see colors and I just wanted to just play with colors. And I started painting like really abstract lines, just really fluid movements. wasn't trying to paint anything. I just kind of was feeling my emotions were coming out in the art piece, and I really felt like the presence of my brother, the spirit of my brother, was there with me painting. He was a painter. He was a dancer. He was just a vibrant ball of joy and energy. Um, and he had such a thirst and a fever for like life and art and joy. And yeah, I felt like he was with me in that painting, and I really loved what I made. It was just a colorful canvas of squiggly lines, and I felt like I saw my brain, like the insides of my emotions, like maybe an alternative world. And so I kept doing that. I've painted like these kind of abstract space like landscapes ever since. And sometimes I still feel like my brother is with me, but mostly I feel very free. I feel very childlike. I feel unrestricted. Um, I think a thing for me with writing sometimes too is I have some training in writing. I went to school for it. And so I have these rules that sometimes shape what I'm trying to get out. And that can be frustrating. I have no formal training when it comes to painting. I have no rules to follow by. So I feel like completely free and like bust wide open when I paint. I think this bleeds into just like organizing and community work because I think this kind of creativity, curiosity, like self assertion is in everyone. Um, Whether that is standing up for yourself or your community or being creative. And a lot of the work that I do with CHAAD is honestly just getting workers to understand that they are powerful. Oftentimes that is with a boss, but sometimes it can be creatively. Um, I've led a couple of workshops with like close friends and people around painting. And the question I always get when we first start is, what do I paint? What do I make? I hate that question. I don't know. Paint whatever you want to paint. Like it's going back to the work thing. It's like just do the work. Why do I have to tell you what to do? And I think yeah, we're conditioned to lose our sense of wonder, our sense of play, our sense of joy and curiosity. And yes, part of organizing is getting you to stand up to the boss, to oppressive systems, but also a part of organizing is getting you to be more in tune with yourself, with nature, with natural like instinct and intuition. And if you can tap back into that just a little bit more, I think I've succeeded, whether you're standing up for the to the boss or not. So I definitely see these two things like feeding each other. I feel really powerful when I'm with a group of workers that are standing up for each other, but I also feel really, really powerful when I'm creating something that I find really beautiful organically.
First of all, I just want to thank you for the gift of sharing about your brother with us. Like, he sounds like an incredible human, and I know it's been a while, but condolences for that loss.
Thank you.
And what a beautiful connection between how art fuels that sense of self self agency, and like that connection I think is so beautiful for people who aren't artists, and I'm not one of them, so I can't really get into their brains. But I know as artists being able to take that sense of like, I make decisions. I decide to do this thing as an actor. I decide, and even we have issues with that because we're run by directors. So like, but so how can I now make that own that part of myself just as a person, and then parlay that into my community organizing? That through line I think is so interesting, and I've not heard it put that way. I also just want to pick out what you were talking about with that, how writing doesn't necessarily have the same feeling from you because you have the formal background in it. I've been feeling the same way, but I've not heard it articulated because I think there's ways in which like anything related to performance, I'm like, I don't like I'll do it. I love it, of course, but I'm trained in it. So it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't give me the same sense of like, whew, as I'm like, I've been creating centerpieces and things for my business, and I'm like, ooh, I'm me. I just put some green on here, and like there is a freedom because no one told you to do that, and no there's no rule. Like I love what
It's
that is.
like being a kid again, and it's before
Yes.
adults tell you like stop and you have to do it this way. It's
Hmm.
just a sense of freedom that you can still tap into sometimes, and I just find it so liberating.
Yes. Yes. Oh, I love that so much. I'm gonna hold that for myself. So I know we're kind of getting to the end of our conversation. I have like just kind of two more questions I want to ask you.
Hmm.
So I think it would be a missed opportunity not to ask you just straight up, just like what do we who are maybe not involved in the hospitality industry here in Chicago, what do we need to know and what can we do to support the organizing around and advocacy around workers' rights?
What I've heard people don't understand about the industry, one, the people who work in the industry are professionals. They are as deserving of fair wages and compensation as a doctor or lawyer. They work hard. They produce fantastic experiences that most of us come back to again and again and again. So I think pushing out the door any conversation around, well, who should be paid what, we all need to get out of that argument. Most workers in the city, the majority of restaurant workers, they don't have traditional benefits that you get at most jobs. I think a lot of artists, it's also the same. So no 401k, no health insurance. These things are rare actually in the industry. So you have an industry where people are using their bodies and their mental and emotional capacities every day, and they don't have the basic benefits to even fully care for themselves. We also just experienced within the city of Chicago, we have what is called within the industry the tipped wage. So tipped workers who are usually servers or bartenders, they make less than the minimum wage. So the minimum wage right now in Chicago is about $17. Servers, bartenders, bussers, they can be paid, I think it's just under $13. I think it's like $12.96 an hour. And the idea is that the tips that they earn will make up for that. So on one hand, tipping is still really important. It is how most of the service industry is paying their bills. So please tip your servers and bartenders. It is necessary for their survival. But also, the city council 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 2023, so 3 years ago, did vote to phase out or abolish the tipped minimum wage. So they were going to phase that out over time, and all of the tipped workers, servers, bartenders would their base wage would be up to the minimum wage. Back in May, city council voted to pause that for 2 years. So instead of workers receiving a raise this year and next year, they're now not getting that. They're not getting it while we're experiencing increase in rent, in gas, in taxes, in food. We're pausing the raises that tipped workers were supposed to receive, that city council voted for them to receive about 3 years ago, because some in city council and powerful restaurant lobbies want to protect restaurants and the business versus the workers that are actually making their place is what it is. So that is a fight that's happening within the city. If you care about hospitality, if you care about restaurant workers, I would say as our elections are coming up, vote for elected officials who support working class people, not only in the industry, but also, our teachers, our postal workers across the industry. Working class people, regardless of industry, are the foundation of not just the city, but really our nation. So I would look at how you're going to vote this coming election. I'm very excited for this next guide. Tip your workers, and I think when you hear stories of abuse within restaurants, your money as a consumer has a lot of power within the industry. So if you've heard tales of a chef being abusive, of a certain restaurant group or restaurant perpetrating abuse, don't go there. Encourage your friends not to go there. Host your birthday party, your anniversary at a different space. There are so many great restaurants in Chicago to choose from. I would be intentional about where you're spending your money.
Thank you for that. Definitely things we can all stay aware of and like who is even if you're not an hourly worker, we're all impacted by that. We all go out for dinner, go get coffee, stay at hotels. So it matters. It certainly matters, and we all need to rally around that. So thank you for sharing that. As we close out, I do want to ask you because as we were talking about at the beginning of our conversation, like we're Chicago now. We like yes, Chicago. So where do you go in the city to find joy? Where's your space?
I love eating and drinking. So I have my favorite places.
Mhm.
This has been a year of dance for me. I love house music. I love dancing with my folks. So I've been doing a lot more of that. So I actually like some of the DJ and music pop-ups that have been happening semi-organically in the city. So there's Arboreal, which happens in Humboldt Park. I think it's like twice a month on a Sunday. There's one this Sunday actually. So that is like a house set that just happens in the park. They set up with a DJ booth and speakers, and people come and lay out picnic blankets, and people sit and dance in the park. Another one is Vibes on Logan. That is also on Sunday. And again, very organically, people just are sitting up in the boulevard and dancing. So I like to show up to these kind of these claiming of public spaces. I love that. I love not spending money when we can. I feel like every time you leave the house, it's like, oh, I just lost $50. So I like these free, semi-cheap alternatives. I love the beach. I live near the Garfield Park Conservatory. I think that's a place that brings me a lot of joy. And I also really love hosting in my space. So I have a gorgeous backyard. I have lots of backyard parties. I invite people over to do arts and crafts, to play board games, to just sit in the backyard and swat at mosquitoes. Um, yeah, I think I've been trying to spend actually less time in restaurants and bars lately and just more time outside. I think it's also really important in the summer.
Yes, yes to all those suggestions. I didn't know that stuff was happening. So that's very cool. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Hopefully people
Yeah,
can get into those things, especially again, so they don't have to spend that money.
exactly.
Well, okay, thank you so much, Raeghn, for joining me in this conversation today. Collective Conversations is rooted in the belief that local knowledge and lived experience are essential to social change and deserve to be documented, shared, and celebrated with care. So, as we wrap up our conversation today, we're sending good energy to you, to your team at the CHAAD Project, to the Girl I Guess team. We're celebrating you all. We want to encourage folks to follow the CHAAD Project on Instagram at CHAAD Project, two A's in CHAAD. You can check out their website, thechaadproject.org. We encourage folks to donate if they have the capacity to. And then, of course, be sure to tap into the Girl I Guess voter guide, especially as we get into these upcoming elections that are so very important. Again, I use them and they provide a lot of like great research that you have done that's really thorough. But then you also have a guide for people to do their own research. It's a great resource. So we encourage folks to use that. And as we close out, because we're celebrating you, we also like to give folks a moment to celebrate others if you want to pass that along. So if are there any local businesses, organizations, organizers that you want to shout out and celebrate today?
Ooh, well, I would definitely shout out my co-author, Stephanie Scora, for The Girl, I Guess. Lots of props and love to her. Another industry person that I think is doing some cool things, Chicago native who moved away but is back, is Daddy Longlegs. They are great. And then I'm also just going to shout out one of my favorite Chicago DJs, Raven Wright. I would check her out on Instagram, and she spins all over the city.
So we'll be sure to link to all of those things when we put this out so folks can tap in. But again, thank you. And that's it for our conversation. Again, celebrating you. We're celebrating everybody reading, watching, listening, whatever they're doing for both the big and small things they do every day for justice and liberation. And I celebrate you and thank you for surviving, for working, and for choosing another way.
Thank you, Alexis.